How's it going, guys? Needless Space here, and welcome to the channel with fast and easy guides that get straight to the point. So today we're going to be talking about the new game Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout, and I'm going to cover how you can give yourself the edge and get the win on every single stage to get your hands on the glorious crown. We have a lot of stages to cover, so we're just going to jump right into it. So first off, we have Dizzy Heights. Navigate the obstacles and race to the finish line. So this one's actually pretty straightforward, and when you get to the spinning discs, it actually even puts arrows on it showing you which way they are turning. Just make sure to go with the flow of the arrows. Do not try to work against them because you're going to only be hindering yourself. There are small gaps between the discs, so make sure you're jumping in between them. When you get to the section with the balls rolling down and all the blocks lined up, make sure when you get out of the way of one of the balls, you're not just sitting behind one of the squares waiting. Be constantly moving forward. If a ball's coming in your lane, jump to the one next to you where there isn't one. Once you get to the point with the two paths that split from the middle with spinning discs on both sides, a little tip here, it is slightly faster to take the right side due to the way that the wheels are spinning. If you do fall off on this part, don't worry about it. There's a course down below. It'll just take you a little bit longer. Next is DoorDash. Break through doors and race to the finish line. Some are real, some are fake. So the tip here for this one is to not be in the very front of the pack, but also don't be too far behind. Just let a layer of people go up in front of you and test the doors. And then as soon as you see one start to break, jet for that one, and you have to jump through the door frames. Next is Fruit Chute. Dodge the flying fruit and race up the conveyor belt to reach the finish line. So the first tip here is do not jump while you're on the conveyor belt. It is only going to slow you down. And when you're making your way up, you want to stick all the way to the right or all the way to the left as much as you can. That way the pink pyramids will actually block some of the incoming fruit. And of course, keep your eyes peeled way up ahead so you can kind of anticipate the trajectory that they're coming at. Next up is Gate Crash. Now for this one, there's not really any good strategy to tackling it. You're just going to want to be focusing on your timing. Every row of doors will move up and down at a different pace, so keep this in mind. The hardest part of the level is probably the end when you have to slide down the ramp and jump to the finish line. Again, it's all about your timing. Next up is Hit Parade. So at the beginning of this one is going to be a few balance beams, and if you feel like you can easily make it across these to the platform, definitely go for it because it's going to be much faster. But if you think you might fall halfway through, or if you're not so good at them, just drop down right when you hit these beams because it's going to be faster than falling halfway through. Next is a huge cluster of spinning paddles, and for this one, just follow the crowd. It's only going to hinder you if you try to make your own path, as the paddles are going to knock you around. When you get to the big barrier after the paddles that opens and closes, you should know that you don't have to rush for the center. There is also openings on either side. Then you'll have to cross a bridge with some swinging pendulums. The tip here is to watch the shadows as you're running through to see where they are on their arc. And the last stretch is making your way up a pink slime hill and avoiding obstacles. The main thing here is to make sure you do not jump. This will only slow you down and pull you down the hill. Next is the Seesaw level. So for this one, the most difficult thing is to not fall behind. This is going to make the course much more difficult for you as the seesaws will already be tilting completely in opposite directions. A couple tips for this one is when you do jump to another seesaw from one you're already on, if the fall is pretty high, just dive instead of falling, because when you hit the ground, your fall guy will stand up much faster than if you just straight up fell. This will give you more time to get up and on your feet before you slide off the edge. And also you can see most of the course from the beginning, so make sure to look ahead and don't take paths that are highly populated if you do fall behind. Next up is Slime Climb. So this is probably one of the hardest courses in the game, mostly due to the pressure of the rising slime. You are eliminated as soon as it touches you. So for this one, there are a lot of shortcuts that people have been talking about, but everyone tries to go for these shortcuts, so it's usually easier just to take the main path. This will definitely help you avoid getting knocked down. When you get to the part with the balls that roll down the hill, the easiest strategy for this is just to stick all the way to the right or the left. When you get to the conveyor belts, obviously you want to kind of move up in a diagonal direction. That way you're still moving up the hill but also working against the conveyors. When you get to the balance beams, it's probably one of the hardest sections in the course, but you'll have to stay almost completely in the dead center of these not to fall off. The rest is pretty straightforward, but when you get to the pendulums, if they do end up hitting you, you might be able to save yourself with a quick dive. Next up is the Whirlygig. So these sweepers aren't too bad. You can easily make the jump over them as you're going platform to platform, and sometimes you'll even get hit by one and it'll propel you even farther in the course. This isn't something I'd recommend trying to do, but when it does happen, it's pretty nice. When you get to the section with the big spinning fans, you can actually walk directly between two fans, and if you're not getting bumped by other players too much, you'll easily walk straight through. Next up, you'll have to make a choice either to go through the middle, which is much faster, but you'll have to get past an extremely quick fan that's almost impossible to get through. If you want to increase your win rate, I highly recommend just taking either the right or the left path instead, as this will decrease your chances in getting knocked off. The last part of the course is an extremely slow moving barrier. Just keep your patience here and utilize your dive to make sure you get across the gap. Next is tiptoe. So for this one, there is one slight giveaway. It's not a constant effect, but if you do see a tile that starts slightly shaking, this is a giveaway that it's a fake tile, so do not step on that one. This is a course that only allows a small amount of qualifying players, so make sure when the path does start to get to the end of the course that you are with the crowd, because once that last golden tile is found, it's only seconds before it's over. And if you start to fall behind and have to start over, do note that you can use your jump dive and you'll be able to clear a tile-sized gap. It's an easy way to cut corners if you need to make up some time. Next is block party. So a couple tips for this one: try to steer clear of other players because this will hinder you from making quick movements across the platform. You can also slightly change your camera orientations so you can easily see what's coming before it reaches the platform. And also make sure you try to stay to the center as much as possible. That way you can make quick movements to either side of the platform if need be. Next up is jump club. So if you do fall on this one, it's pretty obvious you do get eliminated instantly, but if you follow the rotation around the same direction, you won't need to jump nearly as often. What you don't want to happen is the upper and lower beams coming at you at the same time, because that's pretty much impossible to get past. Next is rollout. Move between rotating rings to avoid falling into the slime. So this is another one where you're going to want to avoid other players because they can get in your way, and some players will even go to the lengths of grabbing you to try to throw you off the edge. Usually an easy way to do this is to stay to the far right or the far left. And also the safest route is to try to avoid jumping the entire time on this course. You can easily just walk across the rings. Next up is tail tag. Some players start with tails, some don't. So for this one, you want to make sure you have a tail on you when the timer runs out. When you go to grab an enemy that has a tail, you will have to do it for a few seconds before it actually gives you the tail, so make sure you don't just run away without one. This course is actually mostly luck, but there's still a few tips you can utilize to give yourself an advantage. Sometimes it's easier not to just chase an enemy around the course, so try and cut corners and hit enemies head on. You can also do your dive and then grab to give yourself a little bit more reach if you're close enough to doing so. Next is perfect match. So for this one, remember you only have to memorize the tiles that it shows right before the timer is up. If you do find yourself unable to remember where a tile was when the timer is up, don't worry, you can usually just follow a nearby confident group when they cluster to a tile. Next is egg scramble. So for this one, in the beginning of the match, you definitely just want to go for the eggs in the center. Don't even try to go out of your way for the golden eggs. If you do get your hands on one, even better, but don't waste time chasing one around. Once the center cluster of eggs have been depleted, you want to go after the team that has the least score, because that's the team that's going to get knocked out, and first and second place teams are going to qualify anyways. If you are the losing team when the center cluster has been depleted, make sure you at least have some members of the team that are trying to defend your nest, while others are going after the other player's eggs. Next up is fall ball. Score goals by getting balls into the opposing team's goal. So this one's essentially soccer with 2 balls. Make sure you do have some team members that do sit back in front of the goal to avoid balls just rolling right in. 1 or 2 will do just fine. And also, if you're tailing an enemy member that's about to dive into a ball, remember you can grab them to hold them back. And if you're near a goal and need to get to the center of the field quickly, just jump straight into the pit of the goal and it'll spawn you back into the center of the field. It's actually faster than running towards the middle. When a ball does make it into the goal, try to be at the center of the field and watch for the shadow of the next one dropping in. If you time it right, you can jump up and hit the ball directly into the other goal from the beginning. Also, sometimes randomly it will throw a football or a golden egg into the field. Do know that these are worth a whopping 5 points instead of 1. So if you're falling behind, definitely try to go after one of those. Next up is hoarders. Keep balls in your area to earn points for your team. So this is another one that's similar to the egg scramble. You definitely want to be going after the losing team to make sure you aren't eliminated. Another tip is to stand just below the raised edge of an enemy team's territory if you see someone rolling a ball that way. That way when they get to the edge, you can jump up and hit the ball back into your territory. And also take note, this game mode can change in an instant, so just if you're way ahead, don't feel like you've already made it. Next up is hoopsie daisy. So when the round starts, do a quick look around and make sure you quickly run after the hoop that's closest to you. And that's sort of the mindset that you want to keep throughout the match. You definitely don't want to dart across the map just because you see a hoop that's wide open. If you see a hoop close to you and there's already some enemies nearby, don't feel like you won't make it in before them. There are plenty of times where I've seen enemy players fail a couple attempts at diving through. Next up is Jinx. The first team to get completely jinxed are eliminated. When you get caught, grab the opposing team to jinx them. So this game mode is somewhat chaotic, but there are still some strategies that you can use to give yourself an advantage. If you start off not being jinxed yet, a good tip is to jump on one of the raised spinning platforms, as these are kind of hard to get to and even harder to run around on. And even better, if an enemy jinxed player does get on there, you can easily just dive off and make a run for it. If you are jinxed, I just recommend staying away from your teammates. That way it gives your team a better advantage of completely eliminating another team. Players like to usually hide around the outer edges of the map and behind pillars. Next is rock and roll. Work together to push your ball to the finish line before the other teams. So for this one, in the beginning, you definitely want to work with your team to get the ball through the obstacles. If you can be the first team to get your ball to the lower level, it gives you a huge advantage. When you get to the slope, there's a lot of dirty tactics that come into play, but note that you can grab other enemy players to stop them from getting in the way of your ball. But if you notice your ball is somewhat in the clear, you can use these dirty tactics yourself and stand in front of the enemy team's balls. Next up is team tail tag. So a lot of the same tips from the regular tail tag can be implemented into this one. And remember, only the team in last place will be eliminated. So it's always better to go for a tail that's closer to you, but if you have a choice, go for the color of the team that's in last place. If you're having troubles grabbing any, it's always a good strategy to hang out on the conveyor belt and run in the opposite direction against the flow. A lot of the time, enemy players won't even realize this and be fed right to you. Next is fall mountain. Reach to the top of the mountain first and use the grab button to grab the crown. So this one, there's not a lot of strategy to. Obviously, you want to avoid the moving obstacles, but there is no golden path. One tip though, make sure you do use the grab button when you get to the crown, because if you just jump at it, you'll bounce off and more than likely lose the round. The crown also does hover up and down, so when you get to it, make sure it's at a lower point so you can actually reach it. Next is Hexagon. Floor pieces fall away when you stand on them. Keep moving to survive the longest to win the crown. So this one, there is a couple tips you can use here. Sometimes it's easier just to stay on the outskirts and run around the edges to give yourself the maximum amount of time on each level. And if you jump across each hexagon, it gives you slightly more time before you're touching it, which will allow more time before the hexagon disappears. Another tip is if you find yourself falling to another level before most other players, you can start knocking out the center hexagons. That way when they fall, it's a better chance of them to fall even lower. And this is another course where you're definitely going to want to utilize your camera angles. If you do start to fall, look downward to make sure you're not going to fall straight through the next level. Next is Jump Showdown. So similar to Jump Club, you want to steer clear of other players as they're pretty much only another obstacle. Another great strategy to use for this one is to stay more towards the center. That way if you do get hit by a beam, there's a slight chance you'll get your footing before you're knocked off. Next is Royal Fumble. So for this one, early on in the match, it does not really matter if you have the tail or not. If you do start with it, it gives you a slight advantage because you can spend your time trying to avoid other players. But the best strategy for this one is not to chase the player with the tail around from behind, but when the timer is nearly out, try to anticipate where the player with the tail is heading and cut them off and get them head on. That way, as soon as you get the tail, the timer will be just about out before another player can grab it. Alright guys, well I hope these tips and tricks will help you get your hands on the final crown, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more content. I will catch you guys in the next one, and as always, good luck and have fun.